Hello everyone, we're here today to go through the genomic sequencing procedure microcosting template model. So this is a framework that's intended to act as a tool for individual laboratories to microcost their standard operating procedures, labor time, and bioinformatics, and help them determine the overall cost of their genomic sequencing procedures. So below on this instructions page are the organization of the model, which I'll go through in a little bit, and some detailed steps that you can look at if you have additional questions. So essentially this template is broken down into 5 different tabs: the instructions tab, the detailed model tab where you'll actually put in your inputs, a supplies tab, that's broken down by where various costs are sourced from. So this tab has information from CMS, VWR, Life Technologies, Illumina, and several other manufacturers. There's also a labor tab where you can find the various costs of, say, a genetics counselor, a lab technician, or the average cost of a bioinformatician, things along those lines. There's also a software and upkeep tab that'll allow you to calculate the cost of something like a custom pipeline, and we'll get into this a little later on in the instructions video. So starting out on the detailed model tab, I'm going to walk you through how to input various costs into this model based on your own laboratory's information. So starting with something like DNA extraction, if you wanted to use, say, an RBC lysis buffer, you would just type in the consumable that you are costing. So from there, you're going to want to pull the consumable cost from the supplies tab. So you would just hit equals and then go down to the supplies tab, and then scroll until you find the item that you're looking for. So right here I have the lysis buffer solution, and we've calculated already for you the price per minute or price per unit. So you're going to click this and hit enter, and your consumable cost will be pulled back onto this detailed model tab. You can also look and see, based on your average batch size, how many samples you'd be using this for. So for the purposes of this video, let's say your batch size is 5, and so then you're also going to want to make your quantity 5. So this should automatically calculate for you once you've put in the quantity and the consumable cost. And so say for this same step you want to use something like a centrifuge. So you're going to go through the same exact process. Essentially, you'll hit equals in your equipment cost. You'll go down to the supplies. You'll look up the cost of a centrifuge. You can see here that CMS has various costs for a centrifuge. You can pick the cost that works best for your lab. So I'm going to go with this price. A little different for equipment is that you're going to want to put in how long the equipment is being used for. So maybe this centrifuge is being used for 5 minutes in this step. And for most of the equipment, you're only going to be using 1, but if you were using 2 centrifuges, you could put that in 2. So that, again, will automatically calculate your cost per step. There's obviously going to be someone running the procedure, so we're going to put in a lab tech. Depending on how long a various step takes, you can put that into. So we'll say this, it takes them 5 minutes to do this step. And then you're going to want to look up the cost of a lab tech. So again, you'll hit equals, go down to labor this time, and look up the cost of a lab tech per minute. Something I would note here is that you can also change the various annual salaries that we have here to match something on in your lab. So once you've completed a full row based on one step of your procedure, if you look over to the right, the average cost for this section is going to calculate. We've broken this down into DNA extraction, library prep, sequencing, and bioinformatics and reporting. And so you'll see that this automatically is updating as we go. So the next example step that I want to put in is, say you want to add a barcode in your library prep steps. So I will type in a barcode. I will look it up in my supplies. Enter in that cost, depending on how many samples. Again, I'll put in 5. So then you have your cost based on a batch size of 5. You're going to want to put one per sample. And so again, if you want to add equipment for a step like this, you could again say you want to add a centrifuge. You go to supplies, you look up a centrifuge cost per minute, and again enter how long you want to run that for. The similar steps again with your personnel. So a lab tech will say again 5 minutes, and his or her cost per minute. So we'll go in here and look up the cost of a lab tech. And again, this will update on the side with your cost for the various steps in this library prep. So you can add in as many steps as you want, and this will eventually calculate your section consumable cost, your equipment cost, your personnel cost, and the amount of time that your personnel has spent for a various section of your protocol. Another cost that we obviously want to capture is our sequencing costs, and a big cost driver here is obviously equipment. So if you wanted to put in, say, the cost of a template kit, before you do that, you would say, we'll use the Ion PGM template. Template kit. We'll look up the cost of that. And you're going to want to use 1 for the whole batch. So that cost will automatically calculate for you. Next up, you're going to want to add equipment, for example, your Ion PGM machine. And so just type that in, hit enter, look up your cost of your Ion PGM system, which we have right here. Enter how many minutes you are going to be running the system for. So we'll say you're running this for maybe 6 hours. And so it'll calculate your per minute cost of that equipment. Like I said earlier, the equipment cost is already calculated for you, but essentially what was done is the total cost of equipment was amortized over useful life of the equipment. So say 5 years is broken down into hours, minutes, and then from there we're able to calculate a unit price per minute, and that's what is being broken out here. And so then based on the number of minutes that you're using it for, the machine, or you can calculate the cost of machine. So here we'll say it takes our lab tech 15 minutes to set everything up, and we'll go right ahead and add that back in. So this gives you kind of an example of adding in steps for sequencing. Again, they're being rounded up over here. So one of the other things that we are obviously going to want to capture is sign out. And so you can come down here to where we have report generation and sign out. So it obviously varies by lab who's doing the sign outs and how long it takes, but we're just going to give an example here. So we'll say it takes a fellow 45 minutes per sample, and we'll say he's doing looking at the results from 5 samples. We will pull his cost from the labor tab. It looks like right here, C7 is the cost of a senior lab tech or fellow, and that will calculate his cost over here. We could also add in a pathologist, for example, and maybe it takes him 45 minutes to look at everything. And again, we would go to the labor tab, pull his permanent cost, and it would calculate for us over here how much everything is costing. Another thing that is an important cost driver for labs is the creation of a bioinformatics pipeline. And so we will move over here and type in pipeline. And before we try to pull a cost, we're going to want to calculate on the software and upkeep tab how much your pipeline is for an individual lab. So if you're creating your pipeline, you can use this tool right here. Say it takes you 3 bioinformaticians working 25% of their time for, say, 18 months. Based on their average salaries, it will calculate. You can add more or fewer people to that. Say a lab director is working 10% of the time for 6 months on the pipeline. That will calculate how much it costs to create one pipeline. That cost will pull up here into a per minute use for the pipeline. Another important factor to look at is how much of the pipeline is being attributed to one assay. So right now we have this 100% factor. If you are using this pipeline for several assays, you may want to move this factor down to 50% if you're using it for 2 assays, or whatever works for your specific situation based on how much you're using that pipeline. And so you'll see that it updates your cost based on how much of this pipeline is dedicated to one specific assay. So we'll go back over to our detailed model tab, and we're going to want to pull the cost of a pipeline. So we'll again hit equals, come over to our software tab, click this per minute price of our custom pipeline, hit enter. It'll pull back into this page. And then based on how long you use your pipeline, we'll say maybe you run your pipeline runs for an hour. It'll calculate the cost per sample based on your per minute costs. We can do a similar exercise with validation. So all of that in, we're going to have a pretty decent amount of numbers over here as an example. So we're going to want to come down to the bottom where we have this calculator, and we're going to want to put in the average batch size we've been using, and it should update automatically based on all of the information that we've put in so far. Other things we're going to want to think about are overhead. So I know some labs use a flat rate, or some use a percentage. So if you want to put in your overhead factor, say you're using 20% is your overhead factor, that will calculate in here. So based on this, we should have a pretty full table. I know these costs are pretty scarce or small because we haven't put in a full protocol, but I just want you to see how everything calculates and rolls up together. So once we've done things like put in our sample size per batch, it's going to have the total number of samples per year. As you fill out this template model more thoroughly, this will give you more and more detailed information. But essentially what this table does is it rolls out the total amount of labor time by section. So for example, DNA extraction, library prep, sequencing, data analysis, reporting, and sign out will all, your amount of time that you're spending on these variables is here. Below this section is costs. And so you'll have your DNA extraction costs, your library prep costs, your sequencing costs. You'll also have your equipment costs based on the various parts in your protocol, as well as the labor costs. Again, up here is labor time. Down here we have labor costs. We also have just the cost of bioinformatics and reporting will be generated here. The total validation, maintenance, and overhead costs will be here. And finally, your total assay cost will be right here. And so that's essentially how this template model works. I hope that has been helpful to see someone inputting values into the template model and that you will enjoy being able to use this tool with your own lab. Thanks.